Then condition 1.2 to taxi private hire car operator standard licence conditions, which were approved by the Regulatory Committee on the 15th of May 2018. The licensing authority is committed to ensuring equitable access to transportation services. However, a reassessment of the existing conditions is necessary to meet the evolving needs of the trade. Currently, condition 1.2 states, on the date for which an application for a taxi or private hire vehicle licence is received, the vehicle or any replacement vehicle must be less than 5 years old. So today it is recommended that the Regulatory Committee chooses the most appropriate option contained in paragraphs 2.2 to 2.6, and that's under the recommendations on page, the second page of the report. So today we're asking for you to choose which one you would like between 2.2 and 2.6 to be the new amended version. And Paul, would you like to add anything else?
Yes, just very briefly, the committee members here will know that we operate a taxi owners and operators and private hire owner and operators forum. We've relatively recently, by recently say the last couple of years, reinstated and reinvigorated that group. They're quite a useful group. I think Councillor Lee chairs the group. They are quite a useful group. They certainly, it gives them the opportunity to be heard. Concerns have been raised for some time about age limits on vehicles. The Scottish Government, in fact, recognised that age limits are, I think the word they say is not necessarily the right way to assess suitability. It's a relatively arbitrary process that if a car's 5 years old and becomes 5 years and 1 day old the next day, it's no longer suitable to become a taxi. It seems to me quite an unusual approach. I understand also why we took that approach in 2018. At the time, it seemed the right thing to do in terms of the Clackmannanshire picture. We're certainly changed now. We struggled for a while to get wheelchair accessible vehicles on the road. We're starting to fill that gap. One of the reasons was cost to operators in buying vehicles that were less than 5 years old. We put a couple of reports before committee seeking approval in the first instance for wheelchair accessible vehicles. And we're hearing through the trade issues with larger vehicles and the demand for 6-seaters and 8-seaters being out there. And again, the cost associated with acquiring them at less than 5 years old is pretty high compared to some that are over 5-year-old. And there's operators willing to put vehicles on the road. They just can't afford one less than 5 years old. But there are many good examples available of those that are more than 5-year-old. I think it's important that we, from my point of view, that we maintain some standard in there. We don't just remove the restriction completely. I think in discussions, the Euro 6 and the Euro 4 standards for petrol and diesel seem to be a good standard in terms of the emission standards, and obviously vehicles would still be required to pass, any vehicle of any age, still required to pass safety tests, which are once a year when they're less than 5-year-old and then twice a year over 5-year-old. I think it's 3 year it changes. So it's 3 year it changes to being twice checked. And again, that seems to be, in Clackmannanshire, the mileage of taxis isn't like an Edinburgh or a Glasgow taxi, but they're still much higher than the average user. So the biannual safety checks seem to be picking up the majority of the faults. Older vehicles are much better now than they ever were before. So I think it's just a matter for the committee to decide which one of the options, whether we stick with. I think for me, removing the 5 year, any mention of 5 years is probably a step forward. I think 10 years in compliance with the emission standards is probably my favourite option, and it certainly sounded like the option that came from the trade to be most favoured as that range. I don't think we want to go back to a stage where we automatically grant a licence to a 1977 Austin Princess. I'll show you pictures of that later. I'll show you pictures of what one of them looks like later, Sean, because you'll never have heard of them. I don't think anybody's got any desire to go back to that position, but I think a wee bit more flexibility for the trade would be welcomed.
Do members have any questions? Councillor McTaggart?
The conditions, Paul, I notice that, for example, 2.2 in the bold print must be less than 10 years old or must comply with the following Euro emissions. Should that not be and must comply? Because it leaves it open to assumptions there. I think that it needs to be clearer. I'd be happy with that 2.2, but no when it says or must comply.
Let me try and explain how we got there, I think. So nothing under 10 years old won't comply with Euro 4 and Euro 6 because they were introduced more than 10 years ago. So I don't think there would be anything that was less than 10-year-old that wouldn't comply with that. But there may be something in the 11, 12-year-old stuff that is still in suitable condition to be appointed as a taxi. But what we're saying is if it's more than 10 years old, it has to be the Euro 4, Euro 6. So that as time moves forward, there'll be nothing. But I think that's how we came to the conclusion there. We're not excluding even by that condition, we wouldn't be excluding anything automatically on an age limit. If we put and in there, we automatically exclude something with another age limit because we automatically exclude anything that's 10 years old.
Sorry, can I just come in there? Just in addition to what Paul's saying, the Euro 6 emission standards were introduced on the 1st of September 2015. So if we go back 10 years from now, there would be vehicles that are excluded based on the 10-year limit, but still complying with the Euro emissions.
So, well, my next question would be why have 10 years there? Sorry, Maverick. Why have 10 years there at all if there's the potential for them to pass the Euro 4 and the Euro 6 over 10 years, then why have we got the 10 years in there at all? If we're looking at things that might be 11, 12, 13 years old, but that would also pass these emission standards.
It's exactly for points like this that we're here to discuss today. If there's a preference to slightly amend one of the options, that is open to you. I think the thinking was that if it was less than 10 years old, we don't need to assess whether or not it's Euro 4, Euro 6. We would automatically be able to grant that. If it's more than 10 years old, what we have to do is then look and see whether it's Euro 4 or Euro 6. If we remove that 10 years, some older vehicles, there could be older vehicles that still meet the Euro 4, Euro 6 requirements, but it may not be that obvious for us to be able to obtain that information. And I think now we're in line process. But these are exactly the matters that are here to be discussed. That's the reason for the papers.
I find that a bit ambiguous.
Any further questions? Yes, sir, Benny? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, where it's in the Euro 4 and Euro 6 for diesel and petrol, after a few years, I would be aware that would probably go up anyway, Euro 4 and Euro 6. No, would it not actually get better? Or
I can't remember what the latest standard is, but we've already got Euro 7 or 8 vehicles on the road.
Right.
So these standards will keep improving, and it may be that this is a matter that we revisit again in 5 years' time as the standards improve, or emissions rules change, and city centre emission rules may change, and town centre emission rules may change. We don't know what's round the corner. We're trying to future-proof it to the best that we can.
so it's really kind of like a 5-year thing, then you would.
It's supposed to be a minimum standard, and then we can revisit it if the landscape changes.
So it's almost giving new stuff yet. Okay, thanks.
Any further questions from members? No? No? Okay, so I'm aware, and something Taggart there, you're saying you're looking to potentially rework the conditions, but is there anything that we're leaning towards as councillors in terms of pushing this paper across the line? Looking to make any amendments?
No, I'm quite happy with the 2.2 as it is. I think again, as I said earlier on, I'm talking as a non-driver. So the emissions in Euro 4 and Euro 6, it's fairly straight over the top of my head in some occasions. But on this one here, I can understand where Paul's coming from. I do remember us talking about this in the past, and people saying, "Well, I've got a 10-year-old car. Why am or a 15-year-old car, and it's in perfect condition? Why am I being penalised?" And this seems very much a way of dealing with that. So we have said there, a 10-year-old car, it can still be in good condition. If it's not being run very much, then it probably does, it may well comply with the emissions tests. So let's not have a system where it's straightforward at 10 years old. No, we can't do that. It's all about, surely it should be all about testing and ensuring that it's safe for the road with the emissions in it. So with that said, I'm quite happy with Paul's recommendation at 2.2.
No.
Yeah, Councillor Taggart.
I just feel that it kind of contradicts itself there. Less than 10 years old or must comply. If it complies with these emissions, does the age matter? That's my point. Does the age matter? Because why have in there less than 10 years old and then have the second condition or must comply? If it complies, it complies. And I didn't understand the need for 10 years.
Okay, so what we could have is brand new cars of something unique and unusual, potentially imported, that doesn't comply with Euro 6 or Euro 4. There could be some. Now, in the background, there's an exemption in the Civic Government Scotland Act for contract hire vehicles. It's vehicles that are used for a contract of more than 24 hours. Right? Things like that part of the legislation has been revoked by the Scottish Government, although the date of the revocation hasn't been confirmed yet. It will come quite soon. It will come in the next year, 18 months. We could have things like stretch limousines that would then need to be licensed. And those stretch limousines could potentially be less than 10 years old, but not comply with Euro 4, Euro 6. So if you say "and," that would immediately put somebody who spent a long time building up a business out of, because they're type approved, they may not be Euro 4 or Euro 6. A fire engine party bus, right, with 6 seats or 8 seats in the back and a driver, right? There's 2 or 3 exist in Scotland that they take girls to head nights, stuff like that, right? They will not. Some of them on the road may be less than 10 years old. Some of them are now purpose built, but they may not, because of the nature of them, have Euro 4, Euro 6 emission standards. So the reason for the 10 years is to try and future-proof this piece of law that's going to change at some point in the next 18 months as well, where we could have unique vehicles. And we may have somebody wanting to do a wedding car, not necessarily a wedding car, but a special event car, because wedding cars will still be exempt, but a special event car that wants to put his 1977 Austin Princess on the road and finds a way to convert that in some way. And if we put that 10 year, if we keep the 10-year age limit in, or keep the Euro 6 in, potentially that might not be able to happen. So it's just about being able to keep vehicles of a good condition on the road, but give a practicality of approach for operators to move with the times, if you like. What I can tell you pretty confidently we are not going to be overwhelmed with a pile of applications for 10+-year-old cars. We are likely to get an increased number of 6- and 7-year-old cars coming before us if it's for some approval done today. The reason being is there's a lot of local authorities have a 5-year restriction. There's a certain group of vehicles that are preferred by the taxi trade. These vehicles retain their value right up until 5 years old, and the value drops away at 5 years old because of the demand for them as taxis in some areas. For the Superbs and the other one, the Octavias and stuff like that, they're in high demand as taxis. And up until 5-year-old, there's quite a premium on them for low mileage 5-year-old examples because of the number of councils that operate a 5-year age limit. We take that away, that opens the door to the 6- and 7-year-old Superbs, which can be as much as £10,000, £7,000 less than a 5-year-old one. And that's what we're trying to achieve, is to allow locally our trade access to a collection of vehicles that previously they couldn't access. And they'll still be in good condition, they'll still be rigorously checked in terms of safety checks and other checks that are carried out. And I think the or fits what we were trying to achieve rather than the and that's, you know.
I've just said,
As a response, you've actually just made my argument for me, Paul, when you said we could have a 1-year-old vehicle imported that didn't meet Euro 4 and Euro 6. So therefore, Euro 4 and Euro 6 is basically the catch-all. Because regardless if it was 1-year-old, 10-year-old, or 40-year-old, if it doesn't meet Euro 4 and Euro 6, then we wouldn't license it. So
Sorry, can I just come in there? So because the introduction date of Euro 6, we could theoretically have, we changed the wording to and there's a vehicle that was registered, say, 2nd of September 2015, that had 3,000 miles. It's sat for 10 years. It's pretty much a brand new car. If we changed that wording to and received an application for something like that, it would make our life more difficult because we wouldn't be able to take that application because it would be excluded because it's more than 10 years. So the reason the wording is the way it's 10 years or is just to make our lives that bit easier on the off chance that we got an application for a vehicle that was outlived the 10 years but still complied. So that's, from what I remember, that's the only reason why it is written the way it is.
that was just the point I was trying to make. Why is the 10 years in there at all?
Exactly.
But basically that. Either you would have and, or you would take the 10 years out entirely, because we're going to make decisions that might be 11, 12, 13-year-old, as long as they comply with Euro 4 and 6.
Well, that's the committee's prerogative.
I think to go back to the 1-year example, there's a potential, an unlikely potential, but potential for a specialist import of some description that doesn't meet Euro 4 and Euro 6. That 1-year vehicle under that or rule, we could grant under delegated powers, right? If you don't want us to have the power, or not me, I don't have the delegated power, so Leslie Annan and Sean to have the delegated power. If you don't want us to have that delegated powers to grant that licence and you want to hear about that specialist vehicle coming in to make a determination as to whether or not it's suitable as a committee and have somebody come along with expert technical knowledge to explain why it would be suitable to you, then that's what the impact of that would be. It would change that. These specialist vehicles, we couldn't make a decision at officer level on that. I'm understanding what you're asking. So if you change that to 10 years and Euro 4, Euro 6, right? You've got a 1-year-old vehicle that's a specialist import that doesn't meet Euro 4, Euro 6, right? Doesn't mean that it can't be licensed in Clackmannanshire as a taxi. It means that only means that we can't grant it under delegated powers, and it would have to come to committee to decide. If that's what you want, if that's what you want to achieve, then we change that. There's no. I go back to the 1977 Austin Princess. Somebody could apply for an Austin Princess 977 Austin Princess tomorrow with no changes, all that would happen is the only difference is we can't grant that under delegated powers. It would come to you to decide if you wanted a 1977 Austin Princess as a taxi and club manager. And the owner of that vehicle would come along and argue it's in mint condition, it's properly serviced, it's got low mileage, the emissions have been moderated by the addition of some sort of emission extractor, which you can get these days for older vehicles. And you would then have to make a decision about whether or not to grant a license for that operator. Whereas what we're trying to do is remove the amount of occasions. The whole purpose of this was to remove, I've got applications for I think 3 or 4 6 or 7 year old vehicles sitting that if there's no change made today, which of course is an option for you, if there's no change made, they all come to you in the next regulatory committee and you've got 3 applicants sitting waiting another month, another 6 weeks, 8 weeks for the next regulatory committee before their business can get off the ground. We're just trying to ease the process for the trade, which tell us at every meeting we have that they're struggling. You've been present at some of those meetings yourself, and we're trying to find a balance between ensuring the safety, because from a licensing point of view, it's public safety that's all that matters to us. The implications for the business is not a licensing concern. Public safety is a licensing concern. We're satisfied looking at that wording was suitable to give us control of the public safety matters that we could issue and grant under delegated powers without bringing every application that's out with the current remit before the committee and taking up committee time. But if the committee want that, it's easy enough for us to continue doing that. Well, it's me that has to do it, so it's easy enough for me to continue doing it.
Okay. Councillor Fairley?
Yeah, so in terms of the wording at 2.2, Paul, there are two routes by which that licence is going to be granted. Either it's less than 10 years old or it complies with Euro 4, Euro 6.
Yeah.
This isn't an and or issue for me. It's not about putting and in there. It's actually about if it's or complies with, that means any car over 10 years, provided it complies with 4 or 6, could be granted a licence. So I think the issue is about why bother with the 10 years? Why not just have or hire vehicle licenses received, the vehicle or any replacement vehicle must comply with the following Euro emission, because that seems to be the key about whether they're going to be granted a licence or not. It's not their age, it's about whether they comply with that Euro condition.
I think we're still missing the possibility of some vehicles being less than 10 years old, ending up before committee. And if that's what you want, that's fine. We can remove the 10 years. There could still be less than 10-year-old vehicles that end up then appearing before committee. But if they don't comply with Euro 4 and 6, which there are less than 10-year-old vehicles exist that may be suitable to use as a private hire car, not necessarily a taxi, but maybe suitable to be used as a private hire car. But as we said right from the outlet, this is the purpose of the paper. It's to create a discussion, and it's a matter entirely for the committee to decide what wording they want to use in the condition. If it makes the existing conditions more onerous, there's a process we have to go through. Nothing that it sounds like you're discussing is going to make it more onerous, so that's fine. It doesn't matter if it's more onerous than what we've put forward. If it's more onerous than the existing condition, there's a different process. But it's like everything's relaxing that condition. All the options are relaxing that condition. So it's just a matter for you as a committee to decide what your preference is.
Okay, but there's no any under what the wording in 2.2, any vehicle under 10 years wouldn't come in front of the committee. It automatically qualify because it's less than 10 years.
Yes.
But the issue that's
If you leave it 10 years in as an all.
Yeah, so if you take it away, provided it complies with Euro 4 and Euro 6 emissions, which is the key, the age of the vehicles is irrelevant.
So the 2-year-old vehicle that doesn't comply with Euro 4, Euro 6 comes to the committee.
Wouldn't be granted a licence because it doesn't comply with Euro 4 or Euro 6.
Well, you can't say it wouldn't be granted because
Well, that's a conditional.
because it would have to come to committee and you'd make a decision and you'd have to justify the reason why it's not granted. It's not, these are conditions, it's not automatic. Something can apply to, at the moment, right, on that train of thought, anything under 5 years shouldn't be granted a licence because the current condition says it must be less than 5 years, but you've granted licenses to several vehicles that are more than 5 years because you've considered them at committee and you've agreed that they're suitable. If you take the 10 years out, anything under 10 years, anything that doesn't comply with Euro 4, Euro 6 has to come to committee if we get an application.
But that's the reason it's coming to committee, because it doesn't comply with Euro 4, Euro 6, not its age.
And if that's what you want, that's absolutely fine. If that's the will of the committee, then that's fine.
So based on Ordinance 2.2, a car that doesn't comply with this ordinance could still carry the license less than 10 years. I'm saying any vehicle must be less than 10 years or must comply with.
And the example we were talking about is the example that Sean's explained of the 1st of September 2015, something being registered in the 21st of March 2025 that doesn't comply with Euro 4, Euro 6, or something that does comply with Euro 4, Euro 6, would not necessarily come to committee. We would be able to grant that under delegated powers.
They're not, because it's more than 10 years.
No, exactly.
Yeah, but if you put and in there, if you put the and 10 years, or you like, okay, so I'm still on Councillor McTaggart's argument that it should be an and. Is that discussion going about the and?
Yeah, certainly.
I'd used the and because of that, the wording of that was contradictory to me. So it would have to be and to prevent it from being contradictory. However, if we just omit the 10 years, the Euro 4 and Euro 6 would be a catch-all for any vehicle of any age, regardless of what age the vehicle is. If it doesn't comply with Euro 4 and Euro 6, it's a catch-all.
So anything that doesn't comply with Euro 4, Euro 6 comes to committee.
Well, that bit wouldn't be granted because that is the wording.
No, it would come to committee. You have to understand that these conditions are not a ground for refusal. They're merely conditions. Right? The ground for refusal would come from a hearing at the committee. So if somebody applied for a non-Euro 6, Euro 4, Euro 6 application, we would have to refer that to committee because it doesn't meet the conditions. It would include a covering letter saying, I wish to be exempt from these conditions as the current age limits do, and committee would decide whether the non-Euro 4, Euro 6 vehicle is granted a licence. It wouldn't automatically not be granted.
Right. So, on that point, Euro 4 and Euro 6 is the condition, let's say, right? So it fits Euro 4 and Euro 6, it's 12 years old, so it doesn't have to come to committee, right? So if it doesn't fit Euro 4 and Euro 6, if it's even a year old, then it should come to committee. But that, I would suggest, is highly unlikely to happen. So if it came to committee, it would be a very, very rare event. Would you agree with that?
Very, very rare when we get anything over 10 years old as well. It just as an aside, but yes, I would agree. There's very, very few cars coming into the UK or that are non-Euro 6, Euro 4 compliant now, but they do exist, and there's some that may exist that are currently being used for these specialist purposes that may fall into the licensing regime next year. So that was the protection from that to save us bringing these to committee.
Right, so I think Euro 4 and Euro 6 gives us that protection.
If that's your will, then that is your will.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I actually completely hear what's being said by Jane and Phil, to be honest. Euro 4 AI tells me that actually from 2006 onwards, almost all vehicles on the roads will be compliant with Euro 4. So for petrol engines, it's Euro 6 is the issue for the 10 years. So before 2015, they would likely meet Euro 5, but not Euro 6. But so to throw another level of complexity in there, why are we saying that it's Euro 4 and 6 they must meet? Because actually petrol vehicles, according to this, pretty much every car built after 2006 will be compliant. So that takes us actually back 20 years.
So we modelled this off the LEZ requirements. So that's what they are. So that's where it came from originally.
Sorry.
It's okay, that's the point.
If the motion is, or if the amendment was that on the date for which an application for a taxi private hire vehicle licence is received, the vehicle or any replacement vehicle must comply with the following Euro emission engine classification standards and then laid out below. What that's done is taken out must be less than 10 years old or. What difficulty does that give you? What's your concern about it?
I actually don't have any concerns about any of the options that are being discussed in reality, because the picture in the trade is that these limitations that we're opposing are not likely to affect us very often. The 5 year is affecting us, which is why we're moving away. What we try to do is find a balance that keeps the trade happy, because the trade are not keen on. They expressed discomfort at the thought of older vehicles arriving into the scene. Particularly some of the bigger operators in the area that are going into brand new hybrids and stuff like that, and are spending thousands and thousands of pounds on their new cars. They expressed a concern of what that picture might look like. Personally, I've got no concern on any of the options that you've proposed at all. I'm just trying to explain how we came to those options. So it really is, you know, as I've probably said too many times now, a matter for the committee to decide what option they prefer. We're only the administrators of your decisions in this case. You know, in terms of compliance, I've never had an age limit compliance issue, so I'm not even certain, and I've said it in previous reviews of the taxi operating process, I'm not even concerned, satisfied or convinced that it's relevant to be in a condition where it should be in a policy rather than a condition. Many other councils, it's done in all sorts of different ways. And it is, it's just, I don't think it changes the landscape out there of what will happen, what you and me and everybody in this room and everybody in the street will see at the taxi rank and on a Friday night. I don't think any decision that we make will change that landscape, other than make some older vehicles more accessible to the trade, and how we want to work that is entirely a matter to be decided today. I don't think does it cause me any concern removing the less than 10 years. I think that's potentially in there at the request of the trade. They felt a need for some sort of touch on an age limit. We as Sean's explained, that ties in with these cars that are right on the cusp of Euro 6 on the 1st of September 2015. There could be vehicles that are suitable to licence as taxis or private hire cars that are right in that. So I think that's how we got to this wording. You know, I was involved in all the discussions, but didn't draft the specific wording, and never noticed the anomaly that you're suggesting with the and/or at all. It read perfectly fine to me, because I know the purpose of what we were trying to achieve. But I can see what you're saying as well, that the 10 years perhaps doesn't have a great deal of relevance. I think, you know, but again, that's why we're here, so that you guys can make a policy decision, if you like.
It's not just not relevant. I think for people who worry about having one audience.
But John,
It's not just, it may not be relevant, actually having 10 years was compliant, one or another of those cases. Let's through a gate, it might be less than years, but doesn't comply with the most important bit, which is the Euro 4.
Well,
Using the word don't gives them the option. I think it's what I'm concerned about.
And I think there's so few less than 10-year-old cars that will come before us that don't meet Euro 4, Euro 6. I think it's virtually unlikely in Clackmannanshire. If I was sitting here having the same discussion with the regulatory committee in Edinburgh or Glasgow, I'd be having a completely different argument, I think. But I think here it's very unlikely that somebody's going to bring a a Hummer stretch limo into Clacks and operate it out of Clacks that doesn't meet Euro 4, Euro 6 just by its sheer nature, but has an import licence and has a type approval for the various things. I think it's very unlikely that that's what we're going to see sitting in the taxi rank on Friday night, you know, or nearby. Hey, we couldn't test it if it arrives anyway.
In fact, everything.
We wouldn't be able to test it either, which would be the next problem, so.
So that's
Setting aside my complete aversion to modern technology, AI tells me that if you were to import those kind of things, they actually go through pretty stringent tests anyway before you actually get a license to use them. So, individual vehicle approval tests make sure that they meet UK safety and environmental standards. So, yeah.
AI is not quite right on that, but yeah, they're very stringent.
So I think that if somebody was doing that, they do have to go through a whole heap of tests anyway. It's not just like you bring in a vehicle from elsewhere and it doesn't meet any standards. So,
okay. So I think on that basis, are you looking to bring forward an amendment to condition 1.2 under 2.2 the recommendations? So fairly.
Yeah, look, so I'm going to propose, just so we can move on and get a decision one way or another. On the date for which an application for a taxi or private vehicle licence is received, the vehicle or any replacement vehicle must comply with the following Euro emission engine classification standards, and then the bit that follows underneath.
Happy to second. Can I have a show of hands of support for that, please?
Sorry, can I be sure here that what we're talking about is removing that bit with the 10 years on the and Paul's recommendation? Am I correct?
Yeah, so it's 2.2, condition 1.2, and it will read, on the date for which an application for a taxi or private hire vehicle licence is received, the vehicle or any replacement vehicle must comply with the following Euro emission engine classification standards, which is Euro 4 for petrol and Euro 6 for diesel. The removal of must be less than 10 years old.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. Okay, are we happy to accept that proposal? Yep. Yep. Councillor Martin, do you have any objection to that? Foster? I think, yeah, on that basis, we'd be happy to accept that as the proposal. That good enough? Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kenny.